Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast, Flowering into 5D. Today, I have an amazing person to share with you. Her name is Maya. Maya Tiegrah is a spiritual mentor, Noiadi, or a Sami shaman, storyteller, and autistic guide walking between worlds. Through her platform, Tigress Medicine, she offers soul-aligned mentoring, shamanic journeys, and trauma-informed magic for those awakening on the fringes. Maya's work channels fierce truth and tenderness, a blend of ancient ritual, deep listening, and lived wisdom. Identifying as androgynous and asexual, she brings a rare lens to the spiritual path, one that celebrates fluidity, emotional intelligence, and radical self-acceptance. Her clients describe her as a mirror, a mystic, and a lighthouse during the storm. She's not here to fix you. She's here to walk beside you as you reclaim your own power. Wow. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's always interesting to hear yourself being read out loud like that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So I just want to ask you really quickly. So you speak about the neurodivergent resurgence. So I'm just curious, what does that mean to you, and how is it connected to the collective awakening?
Beautiful. Let's start there. So something happened about 10,000 years ago when we moved from being hunter-gatherers to becoming farmers and settlers, where suddenly we started changing our relationship to nature. Nature, everything is unique. Not a single leaf is the same on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lived in tribes, when we were living in communion with nature, difference was essential for our survival. When we started becoming hoarders and settlers, suddenly we wanted to have predictability. We wanted everything to be the same. We wanted every apple on the tree to be identical, right? And so in that shift, suddenly, I don't know if we should call it the patriarchy or what we want to call it, but the kind of governing class that came out of that, which ended up being the people who had the least scruples, often the people who were the least afraid to do horrible things in order to gain more power and more money or whatever, stuff for themselves. They wanted to have people who were easy to control. And in having people who are easy to control, everybody needs to fit the mold so that, propaganda becomes easy because you're speaking to the same person, right?
Right.
And so then something happened again, not too long ago in the European collective, which we refer to as the witch burnings, or the sort of transition into more Christian values, which I don't think Jesus would be a fan of us calling it that, but where again, like we eradicated with intention the people who were feeling and thinking differently. And then fast forward to about exactly 100 years ago now, 1922, they started a racial institute in the country of my birth, Sweden, where they were doing something called eugenics, which was all about having the superior race, which again, sameness. And they actually ended up brutally sterilizing 63,000 people, which was a lot in Sweden back then. I mean, it's a lot of people now, but Sweden is a very small country. So it was a massive part of the population. And they were all the people who had any kind of, different way of thinking, but also poor people and people of the indigenous tribes. I'm coming from that lineage from the Sami people. So just to get rid of anybody who wasn't what they like to call neurotypical these days, or basically like easier to, put into that category. And so something happens. I don't know. Anybody who's paying attention is able to see now, like we're having more and more people identify as different. And it's sort of, I don't know, I think about like when people pave roads and then the weeds start to kind of come out, like nature is just going to come back. So in this kind of trying to eradicate difference, trying to make everybody predictable and the same, like nature is bringing us back with full force. So there are more people now who feel into that difference, feel into that connection back into nature, feel that, I myself am not predictable. which does make me harder to control. And that's a threat to the kind of structure that we have in place. But my work, I feel very much, is to help those people come back, because the reason why they got rid of us in the first place is because they're terrified of us. And so if they're more afraid of us than we are of them, who's really in power here?
Yes, exactly. I absolutely love that. I'm like, yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
I I just want to ask as well because a lot of people that are on this different path have experienced a lot of trauma or because of being different, they've been singled out, they've been, abused or et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to know your perspective, like how can we reclaim power and sovereignty through shamanic journeying, especially when living with this trauma or sensitivity that these people, myself included and yourself included, have experienced?
Yeah, I mean, trauma is a difficult thing to talk about in brief because it's a big topic. I do think it's good to, if I can, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but to have trauma with a capital T and then trauma with a lowercase t, in the sense that lowercase t trauma is absolutely necessary for your development and growth.
Yes.
Like if you think about silly example, but if you go to the gym, you want to get stronger muscles, you need to traumatize your muscles to break them apart, literally to make them grow back stronger. And so some of the most boring, mundane people might be the people who had like the softest, easiest life ever because they basically didn't develop at all. And then there's the thing here shamanically where we have the three worlds. So we live in the middle world. And a lot of us have been told like spirit is all up, so people are kind of upwards oriented, wanting to grow up and like 5D only. In my tradition, we talk about it as a tree. And so if it's a tree and you're living in the middle of the tree, if you want the tree to grow up, you also have to go down. Yes. And so capital T trauma is an initiation into the underworld and the darkness. And if we want to live only up here where it's like sparkly and puppy dogs and rainbows, you are never going to be able to get the kind of power that happens when you go down deep into the underbelly, into reality isn't all pretty and nice, and when we were hunter-gatherers and we lived in communion with nature, we understood reality in a way that now we live in apartments with buttons to press to regulate the air and the light and make everything comfortable. And so I'm not here to say that anything that happened to you is excusable, and so many of the things that do happen should not happen.
Right.
And they are also a way for us to understand the world that we are actually a part of, and the work that we've come here to do. If we are living in a world where we think I'm the problem, we're not going to be able to do that much. It's when we are initiated into darkness and we see evil in the face. And sometimes I heard somebody say, it's not really that somebody hurt you. It's the fact that you met somebody who wanted to cause you pain. Like, again, like seeing evil, seeing things beyond this kind of cookie cutter, like perfect reality that we've been shown on Disney and, then the next part of that is how do we heal? How do we recover? And it has to be in connection with somebody who can hold us, somebody who can witness us, somebody who can come with us into that darkness, because it's very alienating to go through something like that. You come back, and I saw like, how do you know somebody's been through trauma? And it said because they have a hard sense of humor. And I do think that's like a big part of it, right? Like there's a certain dark sense of humor that you get as a reward for having gone through something, that a lot of, again, these kind of innocent people would just look at you and be like, how can you be so morbid? Like, how can you laugh about this? And it's because I survived it. It's because that's my way of taking my power back, is to laugh in the face of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to be also about reclaiming our own narrative, and that needs to happen with somebody else who can sit there and listen without judging, without telling us, oh my God, it's too much for me. Like somebody who can come with us back in there and like turn on the light and put things in order so that it makes sense. And also a big part of it is feeling the feelings that we couldn't feel at the time.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
completely agree. And, it's it's so difficult because a lot of Western societies say, you know, you have to be strong, you have to do it alone. You can't let anybody see your weakness. You have to just be this like on person. And obviously, as you mentioned, it's a myth. Like you can't do it alone. It's not healthy or helpful. And, especially if you're in that victim mentality, which so many people are, how are you going to get out of that alone? Like it just like it's just not
Well, I
possible.
do think like I live a little bit in the future, or maybe a little bit in the past. I don't know. But right now, I'm seeing that I'm part of this wave of people who are going back and healing their personal childhood trauma.
Mm,
And I think that's beautiful. And then there's these people who are kind of done with that and then start moving into, the collective traumas and like the lineage traumas. And we talk a lot about epigenetics these days and like inherited trauma and
mm,
things from our own family line. I see there's a trauma that is just so fundamental that we are all sharing right now, which is this rupture and separation from a relationship to nature.
mm,
Relationship where it's not a relationship to nature, it's that I am nature. And so
yes.
this kind of Western, what you're talking about, this Western culture, what I like to call empire, like the
Mm,
colonialist mindset, which isn't all white people. I come from indigenous white people, but white people were the first victims of this, a lot of them. But it stems from this existential dread,
mm,
which is chronic fear.
mhm,
Fear is a good emotion. I love fear. Like it saved me a lot of times, but this kind of existential dread of like, I don't know, being afraid of everything and being
mm,
afraid that you're meaningless, you're pointless, somebody else is going to come and steal the stuff that you've hoarded. And one day you're going to die and none of it will have any meaning and all that. Like that is all signs that you have lost your connection to spirit, that you've lost your
mm,
connection to the divine forces that are all around us all the time in the form of nature.
mhm,
um and so I think like that's a sort of trauma that underpins the whole thing for us, and why like we feel so calm around animals because they haven't had to go through that. So yeah, like I feel even things like being in a city, where everything is straight lines all the time. Like
mhm,
it's very disruptive to the psyche to have that kind of straight line environment, because when you go out in nature, everything's soft and flowy and
mhm,
again, like there's no sameness. Whereas you come into the city and you feel like I need to fit myself into this, and suddenly there's time and
yeah.
all those issues like really play a part. So yes, like it's important to look at the trauma of what specifically happened to you, and I'm
Mhm,
sorry that that happened to you. And let's not forget, and I don't mean to like add things to your backpack, but the bigger picture of where we are is also massively important for this healing journey that we're undertaking.
mhm. Love it, love it, love it, love it. So I actually just wanted to ask really quickly, just for my own curiosity and also my husband's curiosity, because we both loved reading your journey through, is it Kumbh Mela? Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Can you just, I know it's like such a tale, and I absolutely loved it. Ian loved it. And I just was wondering, could you share a little bit more just about that and how it got you to where you're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, physically, I'm still sort of recovering. Like it was a lot.
Mm,
I have, I think, over the years, like developed this mental picture of myself was like, I need to be strong.
Mm.
And going into that preparation before was like, okay, this is something to endure, you know? And India is not the cleanest country in the world. I don't think anybody's going to be upset if I say it that way. And so many human beings together. Like, I still don't know exactly the numbers. I've seen everything from 400 million to 600 to 700 million, but over the course of the 6 weeks of this festival, hundreds of millions of people. And I've been to India before. I've been to like Bombay and Delhi and these very crowded places, but this was different because there's not this sort of cityscape and societies around it. It's literally just on the dry riverbed. And while the organizers had put together, and I mean, it's amazing, like the size and the sheer like number of humans and preparing for all of that. I don't think, Western countries would be able to do it because health and safety regulators would come in and like, it's just, I don't know, but I thought I was going to go for 3-4 days. I ended up staying for 6 weeks. So obviously beyond, the immediate kind of discomforts and all of that, like the energies around this place and these people and just, being a part of something that was so big. Like, I mean, I don't know if you saw it. There's pictures of this from space where like,
no, I didn't. Wow.
Big thing to do, and I've never been attracted to religion in a way. So I also like, there's a big part of me that finds a lot of it quite preposterous and a little bit strange. And like, I don't feel in myself like I want to bow down or prostrate on in front of a Baba and touch his feet and, all of that. So in some ways it was also kind of going to experience something very, different to me and getting an insight into like, what is humanity? Like, what are we doing? And why do people sign up for this? Like, why do poor people from all over India save up money and bring their whole families on like a long trip to come and take a bath in this river on this specific day? And, so yeah, like I'm really, really, really grateful that I went. It's a once in a lifetime experience. And truly, I think this was the one time that I will go. Next time will be 2037. So I'll be in my 50s. So I think this was the perfect time. I'm also grateful that I didn't go last time 12 years ago. I don't think I would have had the same experience. And I don't think I would have been as equipped internally to handle all the spiritual madness, But that's another thing that I love about this culture and about Sanatan Dharma and about the sadhus and all of it is that they embrace that madness and that authenticity. And like my big takeaway, I think really was sitting for hours and hours and hours and just watching people passing by and starting to be able to see the difference. And simply put, the sadhus walk like they have no care in the world. They walk as if they're like floating just a little bit above ground. And when they looked at me, it was just curiosity or like just, simpler like eyes passing. Whereas most people, I don't know, the rest of us walk as if we're carrying something, even when we're not. And you can sort of start seeing, like, I love this saying in yoga that the ego is chronic muscular tension. So you can sort of see the muscular tension in, normal people, or whereas the sadhus just walk as if, I don't know, they're not afraid of what's around the corner. There's nothing holding on to them. And so that was something beautiful, that like to be able to see it so clearly with my own eyes, like what makes the difference. And deciding to leave and sort of come back into a different dimension, into a different life, was also very, very difficult. And it was a big thing for my ego to humble myself and admit that I wasn't physically able to take it anymore. Like I needed a soft bed. I needed to have something other than chapati to eat. And you know. But yeah, like I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I feel I needed to write about my experience as well to kind of process it for myself and get it out there. And I can't do it justice talking about it because there's so much to say. Like when I came out, people were messaging me like, "Oh, and how was it?" And I just thought, I don't know how to answer that right now. Like, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's if anybody listening wants to read the full story, it is available on my website under Sacred Stories, so you can check it out there.
Yeah, I highly recommend it to anybody listening. Like, wow, what a tale, you know? What a tale. Loved it. So I just want to shift away from that for a minute, just to talk more about. You mentioned that identify as androgynous and as asexual, and so I've noticed as well that you describe asexuality as sacred. So can you just share how that influences your spiritual path and your connection to sovereignty?
Yes. So this is something that's taken me years to unpack as well. When I first came out into myself, like when I was growing up, like my first memories are of feeling very confused because I didn't feel that I was a girl and I didn't
Mm,
know how to present myself to the world. You know, when you're learning to speak, it's like very much immediately gendered.
mm,
And I just grew up sort of feeling very strange about it. I remember my dad shouting at me, like, why can't you just dress normal? Like, why do you have to be so weird? You know? Um, and I am quite female presenting in my exterior. But I've never felt like I fitted in that way. And so when I was younger as well, when I was growing up, and because I come from a family that was quite, well, very toxic, and I didn't feel loved coming out of that,
mm,
I used what I think a lot of young people do. Like I used my sex appeal to get the validation that I was lovable and all of that. But I'm also very aware that I came into the world with so much programming about, love is between a man and a woman. And if you want to feel all the things, like it's about getting that. And so it took me a lot of time to like unpack and recognize that actually like this was a performance and this
mm,
wasn't ever natural to me, and coming back to who I was when I was little, and before all the programming kind of made its way to me, right? So the androgynous part, really, I've met other androgynous people, and that's when I've for the first time was like, oh, this is who, like seeing myself in a mirror for the first time. Like I love sitting in women's circles and feeling like, wow, this is so empowering, and so inspiring, and I get to be one of you. But when I sit with androgynous people, that's where I'm like, okay, yeah, you know. And so it's difficult to talk about because we don't have the language, because language like English, even though it's not as gendered as like French or Spanish, it's still fundamentally binary codes. So you're either this or that. And like when I went to, so my mom did one of those DNA and me tests,
okay.
and we have obviously like a lot of Swedish and Sami in us, but our oldest, so 25,000 years ago, our oldest ancestry comes from a place near Dolní Věstonice in what's now Czech Republic.
Okay.
So me and my mom went there a few years ago, and there is the oldest grave of a shaman in, I think, in the world. It might be in Europe. Don't quote me on this, but the oldest grave of a shaman,
Mm,
and it's a androgynous person. So they don't know still today if this skeleton belonged to a woman or a man. And I stood there by this grave. By the way, if anybody ever goes there, it's one of my favorite museums I've ever been to. It's an incredibly beautiful museum. It's all underground because obviously the earth has grown in the last 25,000 years. But when I stood there, I felt some parts of me, old parts of me, coming back, and realized like this was always a part of our humanity, you know, like I say, like we've had so much of our history altered and so many of these truths forgotten, you know, and there was always people who were not, you know, I mean, there's more intersex people in the world than there are redheads, for example. Like we've always had this difference, you know, and so never wanting to be a mom, never wanting to get married, never like identifying with any of that, and like feeling like that was something to be ashamed of. And now I'm stepping into like, no, actually, this is a fully valid identity. And it doesn't mean that I judge women or, you know, that I think you did something wrong for getting married and having kids. Like, it's not that. It's just my way is fine too. And yeah, these are they're just words, but they're words that give me a lot of power in who I was always, you know.
Well, and I think that's so important is, you know, to just recognize that everybody's on their own journey and to not put your own lens on it or say like, oh, well, I'm this, so you need to be this, or, you know, it's just accepting oneself where we're at. You know, I really love human design because it's called the science of differentiation, in that, you know, it shows you that everybody's different, even if you're born around the same time, or, you know, it doesn't make you the same. And I think, you know, that kind of ties back into our earlier conversation about, you know, there's nothing in nature that's identical, and loving nature for that. And so in turn, loving ourselves because we are nature, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
think human design is beautiful. And what I like about human design is it doesn't superimpose anything around sexuality. And, you know, it's you can do a reading and see like how would I match as a manifester with somebody who's a generator in a love relationship, but it's really not what human design is focused on at all. And I love that because I think, for example, like regular astrology, that's like one of the primary functions, for example, in India, when people get married, is that they use astrology to figure out compatibility. And I'm not sure if, I mean, maybe that's just me, you know, but I'm not sure that that's sort of what the stars are for.
yeah, I agree. I agree because yeah, you can look great on paper, but you know, I mean, I'm not some, you know, famous astrologer, but I don't think astrology necessarily takes into account the life that you've lived so far. I mean, there's different variations of astrology and of Jyotish as well, but I mean, overall, like you said, you know, you can look great on paper, but you meet someone or you actually spend some time with them, you're like, actually, I don't think so.
Yeah. And I think a big part of, you know, the neurodivergent resurgence and sort of coming back into difference as well and healing a lot of these traumas is also just coming out of this kind of nuclear family model and recognizing that maybe it's not, I think, you know, I don't diss marriage or, you know, relationships in that way, but the word relationship is not exclusively for husband and wife type unions. Like I've always felt friendships were massively important to me, that, you know, having mentors and like having a great relationship with your hairdresser, for example, like there's so many relationships that are undervalued because of this overemphasis on, you know, the I don't know, sexual kind of family unit. And so that's something that maybe because I feel a little bit excluded from it, but honestly, it just feels like, yeah, we as a culture focus a lot on claiming those bonds, whereas hopefully everybody gets to have more than one person that is important in their lives. And Yeah.
Mhm. I think that's so important, because like you said, there are so many other types of relationships that you can have that are going to help you just as much, if not more, as like a romantic relationship. Um, I think I've been reading a lot about, this upcoming, like the future, like 2032, 2050. There's all these like, you know, years attached to it. I'm not going to attach a year to it, but the future where we're not living in this empirical uh, society anymore. We're living more as like small communities. And I think that's so important to realize that you can't have a community with just your, romantic partner and your children. Like that's not a community. That's a part of a community. But in Western culture, when we just treat that as the most important thing, we're shutting down the possibility of that evolution of community that is going to be absolutely necessary in the future, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and it's also for your children, right? Like for your children to have other people in their lives other than just you, because
Mm.
especially in this kind of nuclear family model these days where most parents are both working and you know, being a mom at the best of times is a lot of work. But if you then have a job on top and then you're coming home and somebody's going, mommy, 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 like it's a lot. And it's hard for you to be that one person, but also and also psychologically for your children, when you have mother and father as the sort of authoritative figures in your life, it can be hard to grow up out of it. Whereas when you have many adults in your life that you can go to and many that you can model yourself to, you're not just comparing, if you're a girl, what it's like to be a woman against mother, but there's
Mm-hmm.
many little mothers in your community, it gives you a lot more playroom in
Mm-hmm.
figuring out, who you are. And sometimes, like you say, like sometimes your mom's busy or sometimes your mom is not the right one to go to about things. And so when you have more people available to you, for the development of the child, I think that that's going to be a good thing as well.
I completely agree. And I think also, uh, as a parent as well, knowing the people in your community is so important. I mean, like people, as you mentioned, in the Western world, there's, people are working and then they come home and they have like 2 or 3 hours with their kids and then they go to bed and, whatever. But um, people don't know the people who are actually raising their children, like the daycare workers, the teachers, the et cetera. And I think that that's really dangerous because then it creates this divide where the parents don't actually know their children. And maybe they don't, I mean, if we're being real, maybe they don't even like them because the people that are really raising them are not aligned with their values. And I'm not saying then everybody has to be aligned with the values and everything. Like, I'm not saying that, but just knowing your community, I think, is so important. And I see that in the future that is going to change and we are going to start to know each other more. I don't know how we're going to get from here to there, but I see it as something that's absolutely necessary and absolutely coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it is different to have somebody who you don't know, not just taking your child, but having a big group of them, like that kind of dynamic. Also, like in one of my past lives, I did a degree in pedagogy, which is really looking at early childhood years and uh, schooling and how we learn and how the brain develops and everything. And I don't know if it's healthy, again, for a child to be grouped with children its own age.
Yes.
Forgive me for this parallel, but one of my friends got two puppies from different breeds and put the
Mm.
two puppies together, and it was complete chaos. And one of the
Mm.
dog trainers said, no, you need to have an adult dog with them to show them what's right and wrong because you've got two kids that don't know. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you have, I don't know what the average is, like 30 kids in a room
Yeah.
together that are all the same age, that are all going through the same developmental things at the same time. I was teaching yoga many years ago at a small little community school in Goa, actually. where they had, I think, about 20 kids, but they were from age 7 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just amazing because the older kids were showing the younger kids, and and everybody was playing, and I mean, it obviously requires more of the teacher, but good thing. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Pay the teachers more, but to sort of mix it up a little bit, because that's more of a natural family dynamic as well, where you would have the older sibling, and I just think like that's something that, for example, for myself, always felt really stressful, that I was in a group of people that I was constantly being compared to because I was meant to be on par with them. And I don't think that's healthy developmentally.
I completely agree. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I have a play group here in Campot for kids ages 2 to 6 for that very reason. I don't want a bunch of 2-year-olds hanging out together because they're going to learn some things that they probably shouldn't be learning from each other. I completely agree. And in the future, I would love for my daughter to have that experience of all ages. I mean, maybe not 0 to 18, that's a bit much, but like some structure, but not 8-year-olds only. I think that that's actually super detrimental. And I read a book a while ago by Gabor Mate that talked about this, and basically that it's creating more division between parents and their children by segregating them all by age like this. I mean, even old time schoolhouses, it wasn't, oh, the 3-year-olds only, but I could talk about that for a long time.
I think it also it messes us up in the sense that we start thinking that a friend is only somebody who is basically very, very similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not true.
Yes, couldn't agree more. Well, Maya, it has been an absolute pleasure. I just want to say to everybody listening that you can find more about Maya on her website, tigressmedicine.com. I'll just spell it for those who need the spelling. TIGRESSMEDICINE.com. And you can also find her on Instagram and on TikTok, and I'll share that all in the description. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. And do you have anything else that you would like to say before we say goodbye?
I'll just put it out here quickly that because I believe that money should never come between somebody and their healing. If there's somebody listening today who needs somebody like me in your life and you can't afford to pay, every Friday I offer free sessions. You can find more information on my website. So come and grab a time slot with me. I'm here for you when you're ready. Thank you so much, Sam. Thanks for holding me today.
It's my pleasure. All right. Thank you so much.